guys, welcome to this episode of Ask Scott. In this episode, we're going to be talking about approach notes. We're going to be talking about moving up and down the fingerboard really fluently so you're not falling over yourself. And we're also going to be talking about rhythmical figures, how to get down complicated rhythms in bass lines and solos, and much more. Let's check it out. Hey guys, how's it going? Scotty from scottsbasslessons.com. Hope you're well. If you are new to the channel, scottsbasslessons.com, make sure you subscribe and go and check out the website, scottsbasslessons.com. Obviously, we've got some great questions today. We had some great questions last week as well on I think it was what episode was it last week? 10 maybe? I think. Episode 10 maybe. Search it on YouTube or go to the website, scottsbasslessons.com, and check it out there. This week we've also got some great questions as well. If you've got any questions that you want to get answered in the next episode, again, just leave them below, or if you're on Facebook or watching this anywhere else, just leave it in the comments and I'll try and catch it next time. Okay, so let's check out the first question. Any advice on moving up, down and around the neck without causing much noise and errors coming from the fretting hand? Okay, yeah, I've got some great tips on this actually. The first one is that generally when you watch a lot of bass players play, they end up tripping over themselves. And that's because they've not organised the fingering positions on the fretboard efficiently enough. So what they're doing is kind of, let's take a G major scale for instance, right? So a G major scale sounds like this. Okay. Now, if I asked some bass players to do it and if they haven't organised the fingering patterns, they might play something like, okay, so, and then they're playing and then they're maybe stretching too much and, and it's not efficient. If you watch me play it, and onwards, okay, you'll see that my hand is never really stretching or going into any awkward positions, okay? And that's because I've organised all the material I need to use, which is arpeggios and scales and modes. Kind of scales and modes are the same thing. But arpeggios, chord tones, scales and modes, I've organised them all into fingering patterns, okay? So for every scale I play, I have 3 different positions. For instance, on a G major scale, I've got one starting on the first finger. I've got one starting on the second finger. And I've got one starting on the little finger. Okay? And I've got 3 fingering positions for every scale and every arpeggio that I play. And that means that when I'm moving up the fretboard, I move between positions, right? So for instance, if I want to move up the fretboard now, I don't kind of just skip up it with my little finger. I move to a completely new position. And this one here, as you can see, it's that little finger position. Okay, so here we go. I'll move position. I'll move position again. I'll move position. And that takes me right up to the 5th there on the top one. And again, I use this for my arpeggios as well. 3 fingers are the same. So let's take a G major arpeggio, because we talk about G major right now. So G major arpeggio starting from the first finger. G major starting from the second finger. And G major starting from the little finger. And again, this means I can move through the positions without, stumbling, my fingers stumbling over themselves and tripping up and getting that, that thing where you're kind of sliding around on one finger, doing multiple notes and doing silly stretches like I've seen people do, stretches like that where you're stretching over 4 frets with 2 fingers. So how do you get this together? Well, you learn all your scales, obviously, by the 1st, 2nd and 4th finger. And all your arpeggios like that as well. The only one that I don't do that with is the diminished arpeggio and the minor 7th flat 5 scale, which is the locker-in mode. Okay, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I just want to give you a pointer in the right direction there. So that's how I really recommend moving up and down the fingerboard without, in a fluid manner is essentially just organizing these fingering positions and trying to memorize them. I also really recommend being super visual about it. Try and imagine the shapes on the fingerboard. This is something I got from Gary Willis, the great bass player Gary Willis. He is very visually, he's a real visual player, as am I. You'll get other guys that concentrate a lot on notes, so they're thinking all the notes all the time. I don't do that. I actually, although I do know all the notes on my fretboard, don't get me wrong, but I'm not thinking G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. I'm not thinking that. I just think G, and then I assign a shape to that. I've assigned a shape to that scale. Okay, so that's how I do it. Okay, let's check out the next question. Dave Swag's asking, hey Scott, I was wondering how you get your slides to be so fluent and smooth. Hey Dave, how you doing? So by slides, I'm expecting you think you're talking about slides between notes. Okay, so like, and I can use that G major example exactly the same. And I've done a couple of different exercises with this. And these are really cool exercises, actually. Let's do it over G major, because that's what we're talking about today. Or we have been for the last few minutes anyway. What you do, take a simple G major scale or simple major scale or any scale, and every time you use your first finger, I want you to slide to the next available note. Okay, so let me just say that again. Take any scale. In our case, we're taking the G major scale, and every time I play a note with my first finger, my index finger, I'm going to slide to the next available note. It's going to sound like this, okay? Super slow. That's the first finger, slide. First finger, slide. First finger, slide. And that takes us right up to that G. Again, a little bit faster. A bit faster. Now, I can do this as well with my little finger as well. So here we go with a little finger. Every time I play a note with my little finger, I'm going to slide to the next available note. Now, this is going to change the fingering completely. So I'm not going to play, because I'm playing with my little finger here, the second note. So I'm going to play G, A, slide with my little finger. It's going to sound like this. Then C, D, E, slide. Slide, slide. So it's every time I hit a note with my little finger, I slide. So. And I do it on the way down as well, so you can do it down. So just to do it on the way down, let's start on this G here. Every time I play with my first finger, I'll slide to the next note. Slide, slide. Slide. That was with the first finger, with the little finger. Slide, 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 slide. Okay, and when I'm playing scales and figures like that, I'm only ever, not 100% of the time, most of the time, I'm sliding with either my index finger or my little finger. Rock. Okay, so, which is why you'll have heard me play things like this. Okay, and again, I was just using it all the time, so slide, 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 slide. I can't remember what I played now. Okay, so try and get that into your playing, and that's a really great way to start with slides, and also super efficient way of moving around the fretboard as well. And even if you're not ready to do the slides yet, that as an exercise in itself, just playing a major scale or any scale, and every time you play with the index finger, move to the next note, and then every time you play with your little finger, move to the next note. It just mixes up all the fingerings and makes you, really get your shit together. Okay, let's take a look at the next question. Can you touch on the subject of approach notes? You mentioned your systematic approach, and it makes a lot of sense. But part of improvisation can also be moving between the chords and how you melodically get from one chord to the next. I'd like to hear your take on this part of bass playing. Okay, approach notes. Yes, they are super cool and I use them all the time. So essentially, approach notes are when you can forget about scales and modes or anything like that. And so let me think of a chord to demonstrate this over. Let's say we're in the key of E dominant 7. Okay, so we're playing over that chord. So okay, that sound. We've all heard that sound, right? Just if you don't know that, it's just E, G sharp, B. You've got a flat 7 on there, which is the D, and then E. And you should know that arpeggio all around the neck. That's the E dominant 7 arpeggio. Now, if we were grooving on this, okay, we can use approach notes in a few different ways, but the easiest way to start with is just understanding that you can do a chromatic run into each of those chord tones. So for the E, I could play so I'm just doing a chromatic run in. I could do 4 notes below. I could do 4 notes below. So that was just to the root, okay? What about the third? So that was just to the third, and then to the fifth. Now the 7, you can do it. I prefer doing it down to the 7. So that was down and up to the 7. So then I was just doing, chromatic approach notes to the root, 3rd, 5th and 7, and then you can obviously do it to the up there. So you can mess around with 4 notes or 3 notes to the 3rd, to the 5th, to the 7, and then to the root. Okay. Now you can just do, and this is used a lot in improvisation, 1 approach note. So that was just again on the E7. So that's a great solo line. It's on the E7. So imagine that it was something like okay, so I just use that little line. So a chromatic approach to the root, to the 3rd, to the 5th, to the 7, and then to the root. And then ascending down, a lot of the time people use essentially a scale tone, okay? So you go up if you're ascending, but if you're going down to a chord tone, it's good to use a scale tone, okay? So the scale that fits over this chord is E mixolydian. Okay, so going down would be okay, so to the root, 3rd, 5th, to the 7, and then you can mix them up so you can have below, and that lands on it, so below, above, so semitone below, scale tone above, land on the root. And on the 3rd, which is here, so the 3rd is the semitone below, scale tone above, and then land on the 3rd. And then for the 5th, semitone below, and and then scale tone above, and then land on the chord tone, and then for the, what are we on, the 7th, and then for the root. So really slowly it sounds like this. Again. And that's where you get those kind of bebop lines. And okay, I use that one a lot on the thirds. Use super common from guitar players as well. Again, something like. Okay, so that's what the first, if you're just getting into approach notes, I'd really look at that. So again, just to recap, you can do the runs, 3-note and 4-note runs into the root, into the thirds, into the fifths, into the sevenths, and down to the sevenths and to the roots. And then if you're mixing them up, or if you're going down, you could do scale tones and mixing them up. Okay, so hopefully that'll give you a bit of an insight into how to use approach notes. And also check out guys like Jameson, because they used a lot of chromaticism in their lines using approach notes as well. So I'd look at tunes such as Darling Dear is a great tune actually. Jameson played on that. Darling Dear. Check out the bass line. It's just a masterclass in itself. If you haven't checked it out and your playing's up to that kind of level, I'd really recommend that you transcribe that, because it's a really great bass line to get under your fingers. And with all of these things, you should be working all of these concepts, these approach note concepts, and all the concepts that I'm speaking about into your chord tones as well. So you should be taking it around standards such as Autumn Leaves and practicing all the approach notes around that. And learning how to apply them in different ways, not just over one chord as we've been doing today. So let's look at the next question. Lucas is asking, hey Scott, I'm starting to transcribe bass lines of different players, but I'm finding a bit of trouble differentiating rhythmical figures. Have you got any tips for making that easier? Hey Lucas, how you doing? I've got a huge tip, okay? Before you take anything to the bass and start learning on the bass, if it is a more complicated rhythm, learn to clap it first. It's the number one thing I see a lot of bass players falling down on, not really nailing the rhythms of bass lines they're trying to play. And that's because they're trying to learn the rhythm and the bass line at the same time. But if they're not quite there yet, just take a step back from the bass and learn to clap it first. So I'm trying to think of, let's say, I Want You Back, okay? Because that's quite a syncopated line, so okay, so 1, 2, 3, 2, okay, so you're not going to be able to play something like that if you can't clap it. So let's slow it down a bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, then you can see I'm keeping the quarter note pulse with my head and my foot, so that, I'll try and tap it so you can hear it. Okay, so if it's a solo or a bass line or whatever you're trying to transcribe, if you're having problems with the rhythmical side of it, just try and clap it first, because it will help you out so much when you get to the bass, because it'll be like really ingrained in you a lot more than just picking up the bass and going for it. And this goes for anything, as I said, sort of like solos or riffs or, and sometimes it just helps to, I do it now. I practice tapping certain rhythms that might be, that might not feel so natural to me, syncopated rhythms and things like that I'm transcribing. So I really, really recommend checking that technique out. Thanks for the question, Lucas. Great one. Sleepy Dan's asking, here's my question, Scott. As I'm becoming a better bass player, I'd like to incorporate my knowledge and abilities into my bass lines. For instance, I don't always just want to play root notes. However, some musicians react really strange when I start to play some advanced lines, as they just expect me to play the money notes, as you call them. Have you ever experienced this situation? And if so, how do you deal with it? Cheers, Dan. Hey, Dan. Fantastic question. And it is something that I have encountered before and I've learned the hard way. So the most important thing is understanding and evaluating what the musical situation is you are in at that time. So for instance, if you're in I'll give you a few different scenarios. If you're in a band and you rehearse with them regularly, okay, you can bring these ideas to the table and it's not going to freak anybody out, so much. They might like it, they might dislike it, but at least you're going to have a chance to discuss it with them and say, if you play that chord, so for instance, sort of like, if the keys player's playing a D minor, you can play an F, for instance, right? In the bass note, and it's going to give it a completely different flavour. You can say, what do you think? Is it that, do you like that vibe? And they can say, hey, or, ooh, that kind of thing. So in that situation, it's really easy. Second situation is, for instance, you're on a jam session and you're playing with some musicians and you don't necessarily know exactly what their level is, okay? In that situation, I'd be really tentative of throwing in some crazy stuff, because it's likely that they will get lost or confused and you'll put them off and and it'll become a bit of a train wreck. So at the end of the day, it's our job, as it is with everybody, all musicians, it's their job to hold it together. And we can go off and explore different areas of harmony when we're playing, but we've also got to keep in mind the guys that we're playing with and figure out whether they are ready for that kind of thing. So for instance, if we were playing So What, and you're kind of playing this stuff underneath, and where it's kind of like pedal tones, using the minor thirds and the 11ths underneath that D minor. If you're doing that and they haven't got any experience of that, especially on a gig, it's going to freak them out. So you've got to be aware of that musical situation and understand that maybe you've got to take a step back and just, make them feel really comfortable and make them sound great. But also you want to sound great. So you can throw that stuff in, but it can't be as dominant within your bass line. For instance, if I was playing, like something like a groove like D minor, so I'm using that information, but I'm bringing it back to home. So they might, if you're playing with somebody, they might be like, oh, it's okay, he's brought it back home. You're always kind of sort of like bringing somebody back home. The other situation is if you're playing with somebody, it could be in a jam, it could be a scratch gig, you've just got together with them, they're really experienced, you know that they're experienced, and you can feel that they're just like super comfortable with what they're doing and what you're doing, then I would say, feel free to stretch out because you've kind of figured out that they're not going to get freaked out. In fact, they will love what you're doing and they'll work off it. And that's the best situation to be in. When you do something like that and you use it and they're like, yeah, and they're raw and they're getting really excited by what you're doing. So essentially, whatever you do on the bass should really make everybody feel good Okay, if you look at them, the three scenarios that I've talked about, in each of those situations, you're just making people feel really comfortable and really good with what they're doing. And at the end of the day, you'll get more gigs for it. So just be super aware of what the musical situation is that you're playing with. And don't feel weird about it, because I've been in that situation. As I said right at the beginning of this question, you know, I learned the hard way. I was doing crazy stuff and people were like, you know, what's going on? Just when, you know, when you first find out about the crazy stuff that you want to use it everywhere, right? People are like, whoa, especially with singers and things. You've got to be aware that singers, dependent on their level. It's easy to throw them off. So just be, you know, mindful of that. Thanks for checking out this episode of Ask Scott, guys. Again, thank you for all the questions last week, and thank you for all the questions this week. Stick more questions down below and we'll get to them in a future episode. If you haven't been to scottsbasslessons.com, I've stuck a link below. Go check it out. It's the #1 place to learn bass online. And also, if you go to scottsbasslessons.com/toolkit, you can download lots of free bass goodies as well that I've put there for you. scottsbasslessons.com/toolkit. Other than that, take it easy. And as always, I'll see you in the shed. The 2015 Kickstarter challenge.
Hey everybody.
Hey guys.
Hi everybody.
Hello all. Hello.